No. He said they might not hesitate to kill you. Like if you talk about Jesus to them.
Really? He said that to you as a young man?
That's what he said. Then I asked my father, that may be true, but our people, our workers are claiming that they're willing to die for the sake of the gospel. That's why they're gone into this very remote and edgy places and they're working there. So what's the difference in dying in a tribal community and in a Muslim community?
Hi guys, welcome back to Raw Mission. And thanks so much for joining us, whether you're tuning in from Europe or North America or more distant places, like those of you I know living in the Middle East, Chad, Peru or India. I hope these episodes are bringing you great encouragement and increasing your faith for what God can do where you are. Now, one of my favourite things about being part of Frontiers is that we're a global community. We've got church planters from Asia and Latin America, from New Zealand and Africa, all serving in the Muslim world. And it's a high value of ours that we listen to one another and learn from one another. The voices of majority world brothers and sisters, whether academic or not, are so important to our own spiritual formation and our own understanding of how to share Jesus effectively in different cultures. So today it's a huge joy to bring an old friend of mine to the podcast. Ralph Benjamin, sometimes known as Ben, is serving in India and is from India, but he and his wife have been church planters with Frontiers for many years, and they, though staying in their own country, have travelled thousands of miles for the sake of the gospel, crossing state lines, learning new languages and cultures to share with Indian Muslims who have little or no access to God's word and no other connections with God's people. We're going to get an insider's perspective on India, the country with the most amount of unreached people groups in the world, a country of 1.2 billion people and 200 million Muslims. We'll hear about mistakes that the colonial era missionaries made and some of the ongoing effects on the church in India today, but we'll also hear great stories of what God is up to these days.
Okay, well, it's such a privilege and a joy for me to meet an old friend who I haven't really spent time with over the last 10, 15 years, I think. But hi, Ralph. Nice to see you today.
Hi, Matt. Yeah, nice to see you again after, I think, yes, it's a long time.
It is. I mean, I think we last met. It might have been at a big international conference, but definitely I remember you on some of the South Asia conferences we went to in my Pakistan days. Yeah, and you and your wife, it was so nice to meet you and chat with you.
How long have you been in Pakistan after that?
So I basically spent my 30s in Pakistan. It was 2002 to 2011 when we were expelled as a family. But yeah, so probably in my early days there was when I met you guys, 2002, 3, 4, perhaps. Anyway, tell me a little bit about your background and perhaps where did you grow up? Because you're Indian, but I know you've traveled all over the place within India. Tell us where you grew up and perhaps how you met Jane and then how you got into connecting with Frontiers and even working amongst Muslims.
Yes, I grew up in South India, the southernmost part of India, Tamil Nadu. I grew up in a Christian family. My grandfather was a reverend in one of the mainline churches. My father was a school teacher, but even though he was a school teacher, he was very active in the church eldership. He was he was also a well-known church leader in our city where we grew up, and active in a lot of Christian activities. Both parents were very good. They had a heart for missions, and they would do anything for missions. That's my family background.
Yeah, that's great. And if you grew up in Tamil Nadu, then does that mean Tamil is your first language or something else?
I come from a tribal community that's within Tamil Nadu. We speak in another language called Badaga.
Okay.
The hill district is full of our community. It is one of the biggest tribal communities in that state. So we have our own language, and then Tamil is our state language.
Okay.
So we can speak both.
Wow.
Yes.
We'll talk more about languages as we go, I'm sure, in India.
Yeah.
But do carry on. So you grew up in a Christian home there.
Yeah, I always describe my house as a missionary guest house.
Wow.
So sometimes it's what I'd say. If I'm late to my bed will be taken over by some missionary or some pastor who is.
I love that. So you had so many guests coming in. You just
Yes, they're coming.
Oh, you never knew where you'd sleep.
From our childhood, we grew up listening to a lot of missionary stories and interacting with a lot of cross-cultural workers. So that's part of our upbringing.
And where would most of those missionaries have come from? Traditional mission sending countries like Western countries like England and America?
No. Mostly Indians.
Okay.
Mostly because South India has a good Christian presence there. And during 70s, beginning late 60s and 70s, there was a mission movement happened among the churches there.
I see.
So there are quite a few mission agencies started during 70s and 80s.
Brilliant. Local mission in India. And so then tell us how that developed for you yourself into a call to go, really.
In my late teens, in my early 20s, I had a different lifestyle where I wasn't thinking missions, and I was looked at as a rebellion son in the family, and
really,
so parents are praying really hard for me, and every time when there is a lot of missionaries and crusade speakers will be visiting our house. You know the history of her, so everyone will be praying for me, and then all these cross-cultural workers will be praying that I would become a missionary.
Oh yes,
that's the prayer that everyone will be doing. I'm not against them, but I was not fun.
At that time you were not interested and
missions and all those things.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, because the way we grew up, no matter what I did, the missions was always in my mind. I would support them. I would do all the need, and I would help them. I would do all those things, but I just personally was not really, interested on that. During those days, I think the seed was sown. This is the incident that I think which sowed the seed for where I am now. I was maybe 17, 18 at that time, and my father brought in a book called Who is Allah in Islam?
Wow.
And somehow I ended up reading that book. I read the first chapter, and it described the Islamic world in a very beautiful way. The author, this is what he says: you go on a rocket and you look at the world from the rocket, and you see these 5 waves of Muslim worship going around the world 24 hours a day.
Wow.
The first wave starts in Indonesia, and by the time it reaches India, the second wave starts in Indonesia. And by the time the first wave reaches Middle East, the third wave starts in Indonesia. So he described that beautifully. How the wave of worship going around, and I thought about our Revelations passage, like people from every tongue, every tribe worshiping 24 hours. Clothed in white robes, all those things. I thought about that. And then I went and asked my father, Dad, we get a lot of missionaries in our house. So why is that no one is talking about Muslims?
Ooh.
And my father said, no, they're very difficult to reach.
Okay.
They're not easy people. So I said, all our workers are claiming that they're doing a very difficult job. That's why they're asking us to pray for them, support their work, and all those things. So what's the difference in doing a difficult job in a tribal community and in a Muslim community?
Yeah.
My father got a little, uncomfortable. He was a school teacher. Typically, in India, you don't ask questions to a teacher. Only the teacher has the right to ask the question.
That's good. You're challenging his authority a
Yeah.
little bit, and he's thinking, "What?"
So he said, no, their unity is very powerful. They're very strong people. They're very united. And uh, no, he said they might not hesitate to kill you. Like if you talk about Jesus to them.
Really, he said that to you as a young man.
That's what he said. So then I said, then I asked my father, yeah, that's true. That may be true, but our people, our workers are claiming that they're willing to die for the sake of the gospel. That's why they're gone into this very remote and edgy places and they're working there. So what's the difference in dying in a tribal community and in a Muslim community?
Wow, good question.
My father said they are very powerful. Their strength is their unity. So it'll be very difficult to break into their system. So I thought for a second and then asked, we claim and sing and say all kinds of things about God, that our God is all powerful, almighty, there is nothing he can do. So if that is, which one is true? Is our God little powerless than their unity, their power? My father got really upset with me. He said,
too many questions.
He said, well, if God wants to reach Muslims, he will reach them on his own time. You better go do your work now. So back to the place. So I forgot that incident. But several years later, there was another incident happened because of our sister's education. We had to move into the city area, and one of the neighbor's family were Muslims, and we became very good friends. And normally, one day I came to their house to pick up lunch for his son because we both were working in the same place. As I walked into the house, I saw my parents leading a prayer there in their house. And that kind of shocked me,
wow,
so
your parents,
it is not good, advisable to pray in a Muslim house. Were praying in their house because one of their uncles was sick. And they were praying in their house. So now,
I see. So they were praying for one of the uncles to be healed in the Muslim house, and that just surprised you. Yeah,
that surprised me because growing up in a community where you believe that you don't do these things with Muslims.
Yes.
So just a few weeks ago, there was a group of Christian leaders were visiting my hometown, and I happened to. So it so happened that I saw them on the street, and I brought them to my house for a chai. And as we were returning, one of the leaders was from the Muslim background.
Wow.
So he was on hearing my Muslim friend as from a Muslim community, he started witnessing to him. You should believe in Jesus, and he was sharing his life testimony. My friend was very quiet about it, and after they left, my friend, he had a long face, and he told me, "I'm very upset." I said, "Why? What happened?" If that man wants to be a Christian, let him become a Christian. Why is he trying to convert me also?
Right.
So, because I'm not interested in evangelism, missions, and all those things, I kind of, I don't know him, you don't know him. Whatever he said, just forget it. And so I
just don't worry about it. You were worried about the friendship between you and your neighbor.
Yeah.
Just make peace.
Make peace, and then we walked on our own way. Now this is happening. My parents are praying in his house.
Wow.
And I think the same day or the next day, I'm not sure, that uncle died to whom my parents prayed.
He died.
So now I'm even expecting more from them. So I was a little quiet. So that evening, my friend then came and knocked my door, and he says, "Can you come and help me? We we have a death in our house. I was waiting for you to come help me."
Mm.
So okay, I joined, and we finished all the burial, everything. Few days passed. My friend said nothing about any of these things about praying and all. So one day we were walking through the streets. I uh, I was curious, so I asked my friend, "Hey, what do you think about my parents?" And he looked at me and he asked me, "Why? What do you want me to think about them?" I said, "No, well, they came and prayed in your house." He looked at me, "So what's wrong?" I said, "Okay. So you're not upset?" "No, they came and prayed. My uncle was sick, and your parents were the only ones who came and prayed. Even my own family people didn't come and make a prayer for him, but
Wow.
your parents did.
Oh.
So what's your problem?" It's like, okay. I didn't ask any more questions.
That's great. Yeah. You were just expecting them to be angry. It's not their right.
Angry,
And
right?
our
Yeah.
communities shouldn't talk about faith because we have our own
Yeah.
faiths.
And
Fine.
then I went to seminary. I ended up being in a seminary. That's a whole different story. But
Yeah.
during the course of the time, my heart started thinking about Muslims, and I looked at the status of the Muslim work in India. And the guy who was teaching there, the person who actually designed the curriculum and doing most of the teaching was David Bruce Graham, one of the guys who put the Perspectives course together.
Okay.
We were going through that in a very elaborate way.
Mm.
And when we talked about Muslim status of missions in India and around the world, that
Yes.
kind of challenged me. Less than one worker for 1 million people. That's the ratio we have. So that kind of challenged me. And then when I look back my
Yes.
life, I think the incidents that happened in my life, not just these two incidents, but there are other incidents also. In the course of time, I ended up staying with a Muslim family for nearly a month,
Yeah.
for me to recover from a surgery, and they took care of me, and I get to know a lot of extended family and all. A lot of things taught me some important things in my life.
Mm.
Um, and I looked at myself and say, okay, God actually raised me from my young age to this
Yeah.
work, and now I cannot say no for that.
Right. So you feel as you look back, you could suddenly see he'd been preparing you, giving you
Preparing.
Muslim neighbors, putting you in a house for that month, realizing these are people, they're friendly,
Yep.
they're open to the gospel, and
Yes.
God loves them. They're not so hard, they're not so
Yes.
angry and anti hearing the gospel. And like you said, what was that statistic? I mean, I have to pause on that. One worker per million Muslims, is that?
Yeah. Less than one worker per million Muslims
Yeah. In now that's just in India. That's not the world. That's
yeah,
just within India.
within India.
Wow, that's crazy to imagine.
So
I mean, to put that in perspective for our listeners, I mean, let's think about London. London has 7 million people, perhaps 8 million people. So
okay,
imagine
80,
London, and they're just 6 or 7 believers trying to reach the whole of London. It's just crazy. Yeah, in fact,
yes,
it's really hard for us to understand how big India is because
yes,
unless you've traveled there, like I have, I've been so honored to travel around India quite a lot. But you think of it as one country, but somebody said to me the other day, it's not one country, it's like 1,000 countries. And
yes.
I sometimes tell people it is a continent, India, that you can travel for days just to get from one side to the other. It's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. And the one of the things in my observation is the statistics in India can be misleading if you're looking at the percentage
Mm,
because of the numbers,
yeah.
the high volume numbers. I think the best way to look at Indian statistics is look at the actual numbers.
Right.
According to official statistics, we are only 14.5% Muslim, but
Yes.
we make the second largest Muslim country in the world.
In the world, exactly. That's right. Yeah, it's a small population compared to the whole of India, but It's still 200 million Muslims in your country,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
It's
So
huge
so
numbers.
that is an important factor, and I also say, this second largest country in the world is the only free country to talk to a Muslim and share the gospel. And anywhere
Yes.
in any other Muslim country, you end up in serious trouble, legal
Yeah,
trouble.
that's true. So you're saying that in India, because it's well, I suppose a multi-religious country, and it
Secular
has
country.
fairly free laws in terms of speaking
Yeah.
with your neighbors about faith. It's much
Yeah.
easier than in Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
And what about
So,
the church then? Because we're talking about statistics. If there are 14% roughly Muslims in your country, what would be the Christian percentage overall? 10, 12% is or less?
no. The overall Christian percentage officially is less than 4. And
Oh, less than 4%.
people estimate between 2.4 to 4%, something like that.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
with the current work in the last 10 years, things might have a different look in it. But the majority of the Christian presence is way down in South India or in Northeast India.
That's right. Yes, you have Mizoram in the far northeast, and you have the rest of the Christians mostly huddled around those southern states.
Also, the church is growing faster, faster. A lot of things are happening in terms of people coming to faith.
Yeah.
A lot of activities are happening. But the problem is this. We need to look from how India looked before the Mughals, the Muslim kings ruled India. They ruled India for 800 years.
Wow.
And before they came in, how was India looking like? And there are a lot of kingdoms in India. Each region was its own kingdom.
Yes, tiny little states run by Maharajas or Rajas. Yeah,
they were the ones who first unified all these things. They were the ones who ruled from Kabul, Afghanistan, to all the way to just little north of Chennai. They were ruling this whole place. The first unified map of India comes from their time.
Yes, from the Mughal time. Yeah,
Mughal time, 800 years ago. And also, there's another interesting thing happened. The Islam also came to India through another route, through South India. The South India, the Arabs came for trade.
Yeah.
So the South India was very much a lot more peaceful, because for trade, you need to have a peaceful coexistence.
Yes.
When the Islam came from North India, it came through war,
battles and military expansion. Yeah.
So now I'm thinking, where, in a place where you have 330 million gods, one more god, Allah, should not be a problem. And why is that becoming a problem? I think it's because of food. Because in the most parts in India, the people here worship the cow, whereas the beef is in the Persian community who came into India.
Yeah, so food became a problem. More than one extra god, a different deity. Yeah.
So when you have problem in one thing, then everything else becomes a problem.
Yeah.
And the food plays an important role for any community to come together. If two communities cannot sit and eat together, peace is not an easy thing to attain.
Yes.
And then comes the British government, British East India Company in India. So they ruled India for 300 years after the Persians. Okay. When the British came, it's the same issue. The first ever recorded mutiny against the British Army was the Indian Army people against the British government.
If you're enjoying this podcast, why not give us a 5-star rating so that more folks can hear these inspiring stories and join us in praying, sending, giving and going? Or how about inviting me or one of my colleagues to speak at your church? I'd love to hear from you. Email me on matt@frontiers.org.uk. And now back to the podcast.
The first ever recorded mutiny against the British Army was the Indian Army people against the British government, because the Hindus cannot handle cow meat,
Yes.
fat, and the Muslims cannot handle pork.
Pig. Yeah, exactly. And they were using the grease on the weapons, weren't they? They were using the grease for the armament shells or something.
Yeah, that's right.
So the first big Indian mutiny against the British was again all to do with food and animals and food laws.
It's to do with food and so the people who were enemies for 800 years came together to fight against a common enemy.
Yeah,
for the same reason.
Yeah.
And then for 300 years, they kind of came together. They said they are together to fight against this common enemy. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah.
After 300 years, the day British left India, the 300-year-old enmity pops off all of a sudden overnight, and millions killed on one night.
Yes, that's right. So the common enemy, the Brits, leave the country in 1947. Suddenly there's Muslim Hindu violence on a huge scale, as is the land grab, especially around the Punjab, and the trains going to Pakistan, the newly formed Pakistan and East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. Terrible slaughter between the Muslims and the Hindus. I see. So I get it. So this unity just popped overnight.
Yes. So think about this. How many people lived for 300 years to know what happened 300 years ago?
Yeah. No one.
So how did it come out? What happened? For generations, both the communities were passing on this mindset to their younger generation. You don't associate with that community. You don't associate with this community. You are supposed to hate them. So it's been taught. They've been raised in that.
Yes. Even when they were united against the British, you're saying, there was still this historical memory passed down generations saying, don't trust them, don't eat with them.
Yeah.
Interesting. How does your community fit with that? The Christian community? Because in Pakistan, the Muslims look down on the Christians for lots of historical reasons as well. But
generally, the Christians in India are from Hindu background.
Yes, Hindu background.
They are all from Hindu background.
Yeah.
So what we do is when we become Christians, we carry the same attitude into Christianity also.
Interesting. So would you say that's why there's a fear of Islam, fear of Muslims in the Christian community, because it goes back to your Hindu roots?
Yeah. So even though we become believers, we love Jesus, we like to reach out to go to the ends of the earth for the sake of the gospel, we just don't like to go to our next door neighbor because we carry the same mindset.
Yes. That's interesting. I mean, that parallels us here in the British church. We might be excited about sharing the gospel here and evangelism, but there's a fear of Islam. There's a fear of Muslims, maybe because of the post 9/11 world and other historical things. But yeah, there's a little bit of that. Well, really, the Muslims as well on our doorstep, let alone sending people to the Muslim world. We're still very happy to send people to Africa and Latin America, but what about the third of the world, that's never heard the gospel, a quarter of the world that are Muslim? We're still hesitant. Yeah.
Yes. So then there is another problem we also have in the church. Lot of trainings or teachings that are available in the seminaries in India or in the churches is years old things that happen between Christians from the Western world and the Muslims from the Arab world. These two are two opposite worlds. And in those days, the cultural awareness was not there like we have now. So they had some direct conflicts and direct issues, how they would share their faith with each other. They always fought, instead of sharing, they always fought with each other, trying to prove against one another.
Yes.
And there is a whole theology developed out of that.
Yeah.
So that's the teaching that are available in the Indian seminaries, and they're the ones who wrote tons of books. They're the one, because when you go into a seminary, the most important fact is you need volumes of books. So those books were coming from that.
They're coming from the Western Church, you're saying, and they have their
Yeah.
own problems with Muslims and Islam. And that's then pushed onto the Indian church.
That added fuel to an existing mindset.
I see.
So this is another area that I'm trying to work with Indian churches, and I think we were trying to help them see this. I think these two are the stumbling blocks, stumbling blocks when it comes to Muslim work. So the other thing that I'd say is because for a long time the mission educations came from the West to us, where the West had a difficult time in understanding the racial and ethnic issues.
Yes, yeah. The complexities, the background, the history.
The backgrounds, history, the social status.
Yes, the caste systems.
Caste systems, each one plays, and how in every single area caste system plays and all those things. Our education, which came from an outside India, did not help us to pay attention to it.
Right.
Each state has its own language and all those things. So we, along with language and cultural barriers, in each language and cultural barrier, we have these divisions within each language.
And this is what prevents sometimes Indian Christians feeling like they can go and travel across state borders and up to the north or over to the northwest. It's all these complexities, all these racial and caste questions around, let alone religious barriers of reaching Muslims. And I think sometimes we simplify things in the West. We think, oh, well, Indians can reach Indians. It's so easy. It's the same country. So let's go from there back into your own story, because you grew up in Tamil Nadu and in Ooty, and you spoke a tribal language, you said, as well as the state language of Tamil. But then you felt called to do exactly that. You were quite unusual, I suppose, as a young Indian willing to cross state lines and go, and really it's like going into different countries. And so what led to that move, and how did it work?
Okay, I never thought that as a challenge for me as an youngster, because I liked to go to new places. I like to try new things. And my wife was also bold enough to go, try things. So we both came. But after we moved, there were some issues we started facing. That's when the realities started hitting us.
Okay. Give some examples. What was different about that?
My wife was dark-skinned, and she's from South India, and she would always face racial issues.
Interesting. Yes.
And me being somewhat lighter skinned, I was able to mingle well with the people. But my wife had issues, so we needed to work around that system. I needed to make sure that my wife is respected, my wife is accepted. So I needed to work around a few things around her, so that she gets accepted.
So important. So generally speaking, folks in the south would be darker skinned, and folks in the north of India would be lighter skinned. And those in the north, they look down on the darker skin in the south.
I mean, all over India, it is one of how people look is very important. Yes,
and they have the fair and lovely cream to make you as white as possible, bleaching cream. I remember when I first went to India, actually, a long time ago in the 1990s, they would have these Bollywood billboards everywhere with all the famous actors, but they were pink and fat-cheeked, and I thought that's really interesting. They're making their movie stars look as pink and pale as possible.
Yeah. So that's a big thing, so that is something that we needed to work on.
And what about food and clothes? Was it very different moving? Because you moved quite far up north, didn't you?
Yes. Me as a traveler, for me it was not an issue, but my wife, food was an issue. Yes.
Okay.
And she had to go through a lot of major changes on food, and definitely the food is very different there are, like I say, I like this South Indian breakfast,
Yeah.
but that is a big thing.
You missed that up north. Yeah.
So whenever I go to South India, the first thing I would eat is the breakfast item if I can buy it in the evening time. Whenever I land there.
Nice. Yeah, we just wouldn't imagine that crossing states, so many things change. Culture, climate, food, language. What about language? Did you guys have to? Obviously, there's no Tamil spoken up north, so you had to. Could you operate okay in Hindi and Urdu as a national language?
We thought that because I'm from a travel industry, I thought I knew Hindi, but I didn't until I came to now.
Yeah.
So we had to go through a major language learning process. When the Indian missions movement was happening, one of the things that we said was, "We are Indians, we will reach India."
Yeah.
But when I came to North India, I'm an Indian, but except my skin color, I am as foreigner as anybody else.
Right. Interesting. Wow. Apart
Except
from your
my
skin color, you're as foreign as anyone else. That's really interesting.
Anyone else, because the food is different.
Yeah.
The way you dress is different. The way you relate is different.
Yeah.
The first few houses we lived in, we had some difficulty in adjusting for the North Indian lifestyle. How people, when someone comes into our house, how they will be treated, how they would respond to us was little different than how we would do. I mean, when you look from overall, everything looks very similar.
Yeah.
But when you get in, you can see that differences.
Cultural cues and body language and how they do everything.
There are a lot of challenges. My first team did not stay together for more than 2 years. Within few months, one family had to leave because they had struggles. She became pregnant, and wife became pregnant, and they were not able to handle the situations well, so they had to return. And then that there was a single guy left. He stayed with us for 2 years. But all these things, we didn't know where we are going to move when we first moved to North India. But we first moved to a city somewhat close to Delhi. That's 4 or 5 hours from Delhi. It's a city called Dehradun, because a lot of Christian friends there, mission leaders there. So we can go in there, and then from there we can launch out to wherever we wanted to. So we moved there, and then somebody, I like to ride on the motorcycle. So I would borrow a motorcycle from the friends and drive around, outside of the city. And I started seeing a lot of small Muslim villages, several Muslim villages, one after another. I just said that I should go and visit this particular city called Saharanpur. So my wife and I went there, drove around that city. We were not talking to each other. We were on the motorcycle, going around in that street, and we both, at the same time, after riding there for some time, we both together were saying to same time, we both were saying to each other, "This is the place we want to move in."
Wow.
We didn't know what to do, how to move in, or what to do. So we had a week-long prayer walk around the city. We would just choose an area, walk in that street, and pray for that city. God would open us. By the end of the week, we already had a housing opportunity open for us. And we moved into that city. And after some time, we found out that we moved into the largest Muslim pocket in India.
The largest Muslim pocket in India?
Yes.
Wow.
So 13 years life there taught us a lot of things. None of the things that I dreamt of did not happen.
Yeah.
But a lot of things happened that I never thought about.
Okay.
My whole strategy changed. My whole
Yes.
approach to missions changed.
Okay.
My understanding of God works changed.
Hmm.
The 7 days that there were places that we would just stop in a particular place randomly. We would be prompted to pray for that place, and then we would stop and pray. Now, after 10 years, we looked into those. Every place we stood and prayed, there was something significant going on in that city.
Wow. Interesting.
Some other Christian family living there, or some other organization
Mm-hmm.
stepped in that place, or we would have something going on in that place.
Mm. So
Something.
you feel
So,
a lot of those times the Lord had brought you there to prepare the ground, maybe for other
yes.
workers to start the prayer, to soften the people's hearts. And you know, we've seen this in Pakistan too. I remember my former team leader saying that in the old days, people would go to the mountains and they'd have a very hostile reception from the Muslims there. No, we don't want to talk to you. You're very different. You believe three gods, this and that. And then after years of people traveling up there praying, the atmosphere changed and the people's hearts softened. So now you go up there, they say, oh yeah, we're really interested in you guys and your holy books. And yeah, of course, you're Ahle Kitab, you're the people of the book. We Muslims love Christians.
Yes. And on those first few years, this is what happened. This is one significant thing that happened to us is this.
Mm.
We as missionaries, we always tend to go work among the poor people.
Yeah.
And that's what we also did. We would go to the poor people, workers, and all that. That's where we would learn the language. And because of nature of who I am and my background, I started associating with some of the upper people in the status in that city.
Mm-hmm.
And slowly those people would advise me not to go into those areas. So some of the areas that I said I went, they said, don't go there. It is not a good area, this, that, and all. I knew they don't like this caste system. We Christians, you're not supposed to appreciate it, right? So I didn't take it very seriously. But at one point, this one particular person whom I was associating with for a long time and a good friend of mine said, if you go there, don't come here straight.
Don't come here.
Don't come from there to this place straight away.
Why?
That's how the social systems work. I understood that. I
kind
said,
of like you're polluted by being in that community, and now you're walking into our community. So these two shouldn't mix on the same day. It's something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So me and my wife sat and thought about it. And then we look, we have some teammates. Everyone is going to the poor area. They're comfortable going. But we also need to look at the cream of the community who are very important.
Yes, that's right.
Gospel influence comes from the top down, not from bottom up with the layers here in India.
Yes.
One of the reasons gospel did not go well in India is we try to do it from bottom up.
Interesting. But the influences at the top weren't reached with the gospel. So society didn't change or transform as much as you would have hoped.
Yeah. The actual influencers were not reached out with the gospel.
Yeah. That's interesting because even biblically, we see Jesus, of course, working with the poor, healing the leper, but at the same time, sitting with Nicodemus. And Apostle Paul was very, highly educated and so on. So the gospel has to be going both ways, doesn't it? Top down, bottom up, everywhere across.
Whereas while the poor people also accepting Christ, the influencers, the changes happen among the influential communities, that transfers to other communities easily.
Yeah.
So maybe then we thought maybe we should stay focused on those people.
Okay.
But what happened is the cream of the city became our friends, very good friends. Religious leaders, political leaders, and became good friends of us.
That's really important in a place like India, isn't it?
Yeah, and there were two young guys that whom we were discipling for more than 2 years.
Okay, from a Muslim background.
A Muslim background. They were with us thinking that they would have some benefits if they became Christians.
Oh, interesting.
Because we get a lot of foreign friends visiting us. I'm seen as a high flying guy, and so they thought that if they say all the right things, they will also end up in a high flying situation. When they found out that is not happening, they had an argument with me, and we had a talk about that, and then they went back, and then they reported about us to these people,
to the politicians or the religious leaders.
The religious leaders.
Because they were angry that they didn't get the financial benefits, material benefits. So now, they turn on you, they go to the religious leaders.
Yeah. So what happened was the religious leaders told them, we know Mr. Benjamin, and we know you. Don't come and report us about Benjamin.
Really? That's amazing. So they took your side over the two young Muslim guys who'd come to faith. Wow.
Yeah, they said, if that is true, if what you guys are saying is true, you should have come back to us even in the initial days. You've been with Mr. Benjamin for 2 years.
Exactly.
And now that you know that you're not getting anything, now you're coming back and reporting it to us. They're thinkers.
Clever. Wow, that's great. And so you were protected in the community there.
I didn't know this would happen, but God designed it in such a way.
On that, I remember when we were expelled from Pakistan, you look back and you think, why did that happen? And God's will and Satan's plans and all these things, or was it politicians? Was it who did it? Why were we expelled? And I sometimes think maybe we didn't do a good job of just making friends with people in high places, because in cultures like that, it's so important to have people who love you and respect you and trust you. And I think we had a good name. I taught at the university, people knew us and liked us, but probably not enough high officials knew who we were and appreciated us. Yeah.
Look at the book of Acts. Take each name the apostles were going to, the Paul was visiting, or Peter was taken to. Who are those people?
Yeah. Politicians.
All were leaders, either business leaders or politicians, government officials, people of influence in that city.
That's right.
That's all we have time for in today's episode, but do tune in next time to hear more from Ben, including how his trips to visit friends in jail opened a door for the gospel, and what some of the cost will be for the good news to spread throughout India.